Hi everyone, my name is Alyssa Miller and I'm a full-time ceramic artist as well as just all around creative person. I like to dabble in so many different forms of art, but I would definitely say that clay has my heart. A day without getting to mess with the clay is kind of a sad day for me. So it's exciting that I get to share that love of clay and just creating with you guys. I say that the reason why I create is simply to honor God with all that I do, reflect His glory and His kingdom through the work that I make, and just to inspire those around me. I think that anyone can create. It doesn't take a lot of skill or preconceived talent. I know a lot of people believe that it takes a special skill set, but I think anyone can learn these skills. And once you learn them, you have something that is to be treasured because you can create anything that your mind can come up with, and the possibilities are endless. So today, what I'm going to be making is a little bit different. I'm always trying to push myself to grow and to learn, and I'm going to be trying to push myself too. So you get to join me as I make a pinch pot with a twist. And the twist is this: Paul S. Briggs is a famous artist taking that fundamental pinch pot technique and using every pinch possible to make a really unique and gorgeous piece that's not just a simple bowl or vase. It is an advanced form with a lot of movement in it. So come along with me as I create. I've got here a couple balls of clay, and as you know, you've got to prepare the clay. Once you have your wedged up clay, you're going to hit your ball of clay until it's in a spherical shape. And get your hands ready for waking them up and starting to create. Now, Paul S. Briggs' technique is very similar to the traditional technique where you start with a ball of clay, you're going to take your thumb, and you're going to push a hole straight down the center, but you don't want to push all the way through, because if you push all the way through, you're just going to end up with a hole in the middle, just like a donut, and that's not going to be good. You want to try to get that hole as centered as possible, and I can see I made mine a little bit off center, but pinch pot technique is pretty forgiving, so don't worry about it if it's a little off center. All right, so now I have my hole. Now what? I've got a big lump of clay. So something that a lot of people neglect to do is to work the bottom section first. If you work the top section, which most people will start with the top, what's going to happen is your vessel's going to get taller and taller and taller, and then you won't be able to reach down to the center of it to make the bottom nice and even as well, and you'll end up with a really heavy, clunky bottom. So no one wants that. So I'm just going to use my palm and I'm going to press into that. And what I'm doing is I'm just rotating the clay just a little bit each time I press down with my thumb. And if it starts to get a little bit too deep, you can use your other fingers if you want. So I'm just going to work the bottom of the clay first before I ever start to work on the sides. All right, so now I think that my bottom is starting to feel a little bit better. And I'm going to start to slowly work my way up. So originally I was just working this area right here. Now I'm going to move about a ½ inch up. And I'm just going to press all the way around. Now, the interesting thing about Paul Briggs' technique is that he intentionally leaves some thick spots in his technique, which normally you want to have some thin spots throughout, or you want it to be consistent thickness throughout. But in his technique, he intentionally leaves these bands of thick clay, which he then transforms into these really cool design elements. So I'm going to try to reflect that. I've never actually done this technique before, so we're going to just experiment, see what we come up with. All right, so I think I'm going to leave my band right here, just a narrow one. And at this point, it's almost getting to the height where I can do it without pressing into my palm. I can now pinch with just my fingers like this. Everyone's hands are different, so if holding your hands a different way works better for you, go for it. This is just how it feels comfortable in my hand. Your hand might be like, ooh, that feels really not pleasant. All right, so now that I've got a fairly good start, you can see I've got a nice thick band. This part is nice and even. This part's getting there. What I think I'm gonna do is I think I'm going to have 2 bands, and I wanna turn this into a really fun vase. So I think I'll have 2 bands on this one, and then make a top pinch pot to go on top. And then on the top one, I'll bring it in to make the spout. So I think that'll be a really fun aspect to it. So now I'm working on that top section. And you can see once I get it to be the thickness that I'm going for is about that thickness right there around the rim. So all of these thinner spots is about that thickness. It's not perfectly even. You want to try to get it fairly consistent. I'm still working with my clay, so it's not quite consistent yet. And as you work it, it's gonna improve. You can take your finger and just drag across it to make some of those finger marks disappear. One of the things I think is really unique about this technique that's just really beautiful is how you can see the artist's thumbprint. A lot of times artists will go for a really functional pottery, or they'll want it to be, very clean lines. But the pinch pot technique, the artist's fingerprint is revealed in it. And I just love that. I think it's a really cool technique. All right, so I'm gonna let this harden up a bit while I start working on the top part. And I'm just gonna tap the bottom so that it has a bit of a flat spot for where it's gonna be sitting. And it's okay that this is not perfectly beautiful just yet. All right, okay, so I've got my sphere shape yet again. And this time I'm going to push, and because I'm going to make a spout, I'm actually going to push all the way through. So if my fingers will reach. If it doesn't reach, like mine, you can just push from the other side. And now I have a donut hole. So my thumb was just not quite big enough yet. All right, so when I'm thinking about what I want to do, I'm gonna want like a shape that is kind of like this. So kind of a bit of a pot belly with a narrow spout. So when I'm pushing, I want to push inward. I don't want to open up that spout too much because otherwise it'll be really hard to close it in again. And I might have already made it a bit too big. What you can do if you make it too big, like I think I did, is you can collar, which is basically squeezing the clay. I know this looks pretty wonky at this stage, but the more you work with the clay, the more refined it will become. And I think every pinch pot has an ugly phase, so just trust the process. It takes a little bit of a leap of courage, and then little by little, you get something that you're proud of, and that's always really exciting. So a little bit about myself. I went to Liberty University to study to be a ceramic artist, and I get to do that full time. I'm a ceramics instructor here in Jackson, Tennessee, and I absolutely love it. It's my dream job, getting to help people learn about the excitement that I have with clay and passing that excitement on to other artists, both young and old. Very exciting for me to get to share that joy. All right, so I've got the spout started. It's a little wonky around the rim, but I'm kind of thinking I might do a design feature with that wonky design. So we're just gonna leave it now. I could cut it so that it's nice and even but I think I might actually use that flare as part of the design. So we'll see how that goes. Every so often, you're going to want to hold your piece, your top half, over the base just to make sure you're not actually making the top way too large and then they wouldn't line up. So just keep that in mind as you're working with the clay. So I'm leaving a nice thick rim right here, as you can tell. So this spot right here, this little band, is a bit thicker. And then I'm going back to that thinner space right here. If I can manage 5 rings of the unique bands, I'm going to do that, because I think that whenever you have an odd number, the design typically looks stronger. I don't know if I have enough clay to manage that, but we'll see how it goes. And if I can, that would be absolutely fantastic. But I think I will have just the right amount. So here's the top half to my bottom half. It's looking really crazy right now, but here in just a second, we're going to start to refine it to make it look really polished. Okay, so the next step is going to be refining. So I'm going to let this one stiffen up just a bit while I bring this one back to the foreground. And a banding wheel is a really great tool to be able to work all the way around your piece. If you don't have one like this, you could just put your project on a piece of cardboard and turn the cardboard around. But the more that you manipulate the clay, the more you bend it, the more likely it is to warp. So if you don't want your project to warp, which I highly doubt you do, keeping it on a flat surface like this can really help prevent any unwanted warping. So I'm going to have my project just like this. And this is where Paul Briggs's technique is just really unique. I haven't seen anyone else do it before. But in these thick bands that he intentionally left, what he would do is he would then pinch in a different direction. So before we were pinching in this direction, and now I'm going to take a section of that, just like so, and pinch that thick band. So now it's not as thick in that one spot, it's thinning it up. Now, some of his pieces he leaves just like this with those unique shapes just poking out. But the technique that I'm going to try to do today is turning those shapes into petals and leaves, which I think is really fun. So just I don't think I said it before, but what my hand on the inside was doing was just supporting the inside, not pushing, just supporting it, so that when I pinched on the outside, it didn't cause it to collapse. It was just a little added support. So what he was doing was, I don't know how well you'll be able to see it, but he would take the clay and he would then pinch. And let's see if I can replicate it, because this, like I said, this is my first time ever doing it. But he would pinch the clay into a leaf-like shape, okay? And the way he was able to do it, which I don't think I'm replicating it very good, but he was able to pinch the clay to look like petals or leaves. So this first one's looking a little bit rough, but hopefully with a couple more leaves, I'll get the hang of it. Okay, so that one's looking a little bit better. So I'm just now taking that added piece of clay, or not added piece of clay, but the clay that's sticking out, and I'm just pinching it in a new direction. I'm just smoothing out some rough spots. So you can start to see that design coming through. This is a pretty fun technique, actually. I wish I had heard of this artist before. His work is really lovely. And while his work is pretty fluid in the way that it's made, there's kind of a repetitive geometric-like shape that will start to emerge. Even though it's very organic, it also has rhythm to it, and that brings a lot of harmony to the overall design, which, if you know anything about art, whenever you can bring harmony into your design, the overall piece is going to look so much better, so much more thought out, more intentional. And I'm not sure if what I want to do on this second row is to have the leaves go in the same direction or alternate. I'm still deciding on that. So I guess we'll both find out. I'm just loving how this technique is turning out. It's just really fun to just go back to the beginning steps and just play with the clay, because that really is what this feels like. It feels like I'm just playing with the clay and experimenting and having fun, which is just really enjoyable to do. All right, so do I want to have them go in alternating directions or consistent directions? I think for this first one, I think it would be fun to just experiment with alternating directions, just so that I can practice pinching from a different angle. However, that does mean it might make it harder for you to see what I'm doing. So let's see how that goes. So now I'm going to try to pinch from the other direction, and hopefully this is still visible for what you guys are doing. I'll pinch on this side. And when you're pinching these leaves out, it can get a little bit thin. So you want to be careful not to pinch too thin, because if your clay is too thin, it's more likely to crack or chip off or break off. Then it would look a little bit odd. So you want to be careful to just still leave a bit of thickness to it. I would say about that thick at its thinnest point. So that is pretty thin. This is gonna need a little bit of extra care and caution when carrying it over to be loaded into the kiln. But I think it's thick enough that it should survive. Just a little bit about me. I have always found a fascination with dirt, and just my mom would say that dirt was attracted to me when I was little. I would go outside and come back just minutes later, and she'd be like, "You were covered in dirt and you weren't even playing in the dirt. I have no idea how you got so dirty in such a short amount of time." And that's just always how it's been for me, is just I will get excited and start sitting in the dirt and just playing with it. And so I think that my love of working with just clay and experimenting really just started from a young age. But it wasn't until college that I was actually able to take my love of playing in the dirt to a whole new level, because I actually never took any type of pottery class until I went to college. So it was a happy day when I finally got to play with it and see what my hands could create. I've got here the basis of this form, and it is a little bit rough looking still. These clearly don't look like leaves yet. They look more like pinwheels that have a lot of pins on them, but it's really fun. It's fun to see it from above. So I like the movement in this piece. Now I'm going to go ahead and trim it up. And if you don't have a steady hand to just hold it and turn the banding wheel, what you can do is you can take something that's solid. So I have here my water bottle. We're just going to use that as an example. And you just hold onto the water bottle and your tool at kind of like a 45-degree angle. And that tool would just rotate along the piece and just create a line. The goal is not to actually cut all the way through. The goal right now is just to make a line, just so that it's nice and even. So I'm going to go ahead and cut a line in that surface of the clay, just enough to make it nice and even. So once you've done that, you can go ahead and cut all the way through. And that line is just to kind of help guide where you need to be cutting. All right, so it's not perfect, but it'll do the job. It's nice, more level now. Okay, so now I'm not sure if it would be best to go ahead and attach this piece in its current state or pinch it out and then attach. I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and pinch it out first. I could be doing it in the wrong order, but I think the reason why I think that would be easier is simply because it'll be hard to support the inside while pinching because there's such a narrow spout. So if I do this part first, just like I did this one, and then attach, yes, there'll be these little fiddly bits I'll have to avoid touching on the top side. But my hope is that by doing it this way, in this order, it's going to prevent me from pushing too hard and causing it to collapse. So let's just go ahead and move this guy out of the way. We'll come back to you. Just chill out for a little bit. All right, so I'm going to do the same thing. I'm just going to pinch. Remember how I said I'm going to try to have 3 rows on this? We'll see if I'm able to achieve it because this last row is a little bit thin. So it might be just that the middle row is a little bit of little petals. We'll see. We'll see what happens. And I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and pinch these other 2 rows and then go back and do the leaf shapes. That just seems like it would probably be easiest. So I'm encountering a little bit of an issue here. Remember how I said this part is a little bit narrow? Well, all of this weight sitting on top of this narrow spout is causing it to start to sag. So I'm going to try to pinch it upright and not be able to push as much pressure on the inside. So we'll just see how that goes. Okay, so yeah, it's interesting. I think the bottom was a lot more successful, but this part with the narrow spout is giving me a little bit of issue. I don't know if he normally puts it all in one piece and then starts pinching. I haven't actually watched videos of him doing it. I've just seen pictures of his work. So this is just really me experimenting and having fun with it and seeing what happens. So yeah, we'll keep going and see what happens. So I think this row, if we're going to continue the alternating direction, this row will need to turn this way, and then this one will go this way, and then this one will go up. So I think I'll go ahead and pinch this bottom row first. And this first step, he had the touch where he could just pinch it all in one step to make it look like those petals. But I think I'm going to have to go back and tweak each leaf petal and make it a little bit more, looking a little bit sloppy. But that's why we practice, that's why we experiment, because the more techniques that you learn, the better skills that you can apply to your own work. So when I do projects like this, it's not to steal the artist's collection or steal their technique. It's just so that I can put another tool in my tool chest so that I can apply it to my own creative process. And I really do believe that artwork, when you copy someone's artwork, it's the greatest form of flattery. Something like this, I'm not going to sell. I'm just going to use as a practice and just as a reference for myself of different techniques that I could use in future projects. This is literally just as a method to grow as an artist. All right, so I think that first row is looking all right. It seems pretty level, so I don't think I'll need to adjust or cut off this bottom level. So I'm going to go ahead and start pinching the next one. And seeing as I can't put my hand down in the center because that's too deep, I'm just being careful not to push down too hard. I'm just kind of pinching out. And what I'm doing is I've got my thumb behind the leaf and I'm pushing towards my two fingers, so they're kind of doing this type of motion. Okay, so now last row. I'm really excited for this last row. I think I'm gonna also try to have them like not just turn to this direction, but also have a slight upward curve. I think that'll bring the eye up to the narrow neck and add a little bit more visual interest to that. So as I'm pinching, and I might actually be able to put my finger down in here and support it on this row. I'm gonna pinch and pull upwards on this last row. And if you get a little bit of crack lines, don't worry about it. You can always go back and smooth those crack lines up. Right now, just focus on the overall form and flow of the piece. I've got my basic underlying architecture, and I'm kind of terrified, but I think that it's about ready to attach. Okay, so as you can see, I didn't really put the heat gun towards the outside. I was a little bit concerned that using the heat gun on these fragile little bit pieces would cause it to dry out way faster than the main body. And when you have parts of clay that's like thicker and some that are thinner, what's going to happen is the shrinkage rate is going to be different. And when the clay shrinks at different rates, say the thicker clay is going to dry out a lot slower than the thin clay, what's going to happen is along that thick and thin plateau, okay, here's the thick, here's the thin, there's going to be, this part is going to shrink faster. And when it shrinks faster, you can get some crack lines along that seam. So I didn't want to dry out this part too quickly, so I just pointed it mostly at the inside of my piece just to add some structural support and the bottom of the piece, as you saw. So once I've done that, I'm going to take one of my favorite tools. It's XIEM Tools, XIEM, just like this. Okay. And I love it because it's got a needle tool on one end and then it's got a scoring tool on the other. And I'm constantly misplacing tools. So having two tools in one, absolutely fantastic. So I'm just going to go ahead and score along the top. And this is going to help your clay grip hold of each other. So if you don't know what that means, basically when you have two different pieces of clay and you try to attach them, if you were to just put them right up against each other and maybe smooth some clay over it, more than likely your two pieces of clay will snap off when it goes in the kiln because it's got nothing to lock it in. So this little bit of scoring is basically acting like locking fingers with the clay to help it join together and really be secure. So I'm going to score that piece, and I'm also going to score the piece that I'm attaching to it. And I don't need to score these little pieces that are jutting out, just along the inside ring where it's going to be connected to. Whenever you're attaching, you want there to be a little bit of moisture, which I know is kind of ironic because I just dried it up, but that just helps it lock. Some people use slip. I normally just find that a little bit of moisture and it's good to go. So we're going to give it a little bit of a wiggle. I'm just kind of helping those fingers lock together. And another thing that I have found to be very helpful when doing this, not quite in the right place. Come on now. Another thing that I've found helpful is to take a coil, and I like to make it pretty tacky. I don't want it to be like another piece of clay that's hard that I'm attaching. I want it to be kind of squishy. So when you see me do this, I'm basically taking just a regular piece of clay, adding a little bit of water to it, and then I'm going to put it along that seam as just a very thin coil. And that kind of helps the two pieces connect with a little bit more structural intent. So this is, right now, this is looking like a bit of a hot mess, nowhere near as professional as Mr. Paul Briggs' vases are. but it is really funky and fun, and I think as I refine it and carve some details into these leaves, I think that that's going to really help bring it to light and smooth out some of that rough texture. So I'm going to go ahead and work on that for a little bit, and we'll see the finished product, see if it is a technique that I might want to repeat. So far, I really enjoy it. It's fun to play with it. It's a fun technique. So like I said, just rolling out a really thin band of coil to put along that stream. I'm just gonna put a piece of cardboard down because now that it's pretty heavy, I want to make sure that it's pretty easy to take off, and if I have this cardboard under it, it'll be easy to just lift that cardboard and put it on the shelf rather than fiddling with it when it's already pretty fragile. All right. It's kind of looking a little bit like coral that you might find in the ocean, which is pretty fun. Not what I was originally going for, but if it ends up looking like that, I'm not opposed to it. I do like the ocean. All right, so now that I've got that piece of coil, and I'm just gonna take my finger and I'm going to rub downwards and I'm gonna rub upwards. And that's gonna help join that seam. Okay, so thoughts and opinions on this. First off, I really love this technique. I think it's really playful, fun. You can do a lot with it. It's not done yet. It needs to set to be leather hard before I can do anything else with it. Because if I was to fiddle with it right now, I'd probably just push on the petals too much and cause them to crack right off. So I'm gonna let this dry for probably a couple hours, let it harden up a bit. And then I think what I'm gonna do, because right now it's looking a little bit more like vertebrae than actual petals, what I think I'm gonna do is I'm going to carve lines into it and refine the overall shape of the petals. Might make, the bottom rows more like leaves, and then they slowly transform to be more petals, especially right here on this top ring, because I made these top ones so much bigger. So I think that would look really lovely as petals. So if you have some ideas, I'd love to hear them. Comment down in the comments. And if you guys want to see more videos like this, you can hit the subscribe button and like my channel. I'll be trying to post on the regular, but this will be one of my first videos. So you won't see any others right now, but more will be coming. So I'm gonna let this harden and I'll get back to you once it's ready to start the carving process. Okay, so it's been a couple hours. It is now leather hard, and you can tell it's leather hard because it's starting to feel pretty cold to the touch. So I kind of need to work a little bit quickly so that I'm not pushing on it when it's bone dry or trying to work on it when it's super dry, because there's a window that I can work on it. And if it's too dry, these little fiddly bits might snap off, and then it'd be really hard to reattach it. So like I said, what I think I'm going to do, and I already kind of started on these bottom 2 rows while I was just experimenting, is I'm going to go ahead and cut these shapes out and refine them so that they look a little bit more like leaves, okay? Because right now they just kind of look like U shapes. They're not very refined. You can't quite tell what I was going for with them. So yeah, I'm just gonna go in, and this is just like a X-Acto knife, very small blade on it, and it just helps to cut the shape. Okay, so I have carved out the new leaf-shaped structure, and it is definitely looking more like leaves now. So very excited about that. The next step is going to be to smooth out and carve the designs into it, which I absolutely love doing that step. I think it is very relaxing to just kind of do a repetitive task, as well as to see the added level of detail that can be brought about with just a few simple lines. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. We're going to speed up the video, and I'll see you when it's done. Okay, so I basically have this all set to go. I'm gonna let it harden just a bit more, and then what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take a cleaning tool and just knock off all of the burrs. If I was to go ahead and do that right now, I would end up destroying the design that I just put on there. So if I let it dry just a bit longer, like maybe 30 more minutes. Okay, so I have this crazy notion. First off, right along that seam line where I attach the top to the bottom, the outside, the seam looks great. Inside there, I wasn't able to get to it to smooth it out. So I don't like the fact that I won't be able to put anything inside of it. So what I think I'm going to do is I'm going to try to use one of these two long tools. There's this soft thing right here that can reflect like my finger is pushing on the inside. So I think if I work at it, I might be able to get down inside the mold and smooth out that seam line. If I can't get it with this, then I think I'm going to cut off the spout or the rim of the vase and then reattach. So I don't want to have to do that, but if it's just a little too deep, that's what I think I'll do. Yeah, so I won't be able to actually get to it without cutting off the rim. So I'm going to go ahead and do that now. It's always so nerve-wracking cutting in to a piece that you've been working at for a while. All right. So now I should have access to smooth out the inside just a bit more. If I take my phone, I can actually see the inside. You guys won't be able to see what I'm doing here, but yeah. Okay, so I was able to smooth out that seam line on the inside that I was concerned about. And now I'm going to reattach the vase. And because it's short enough, I'll easily be able to smooth out the seam line for this one on both the inside and the outside, because clearly my finger can reach. So I'm going to score this just like we did before, like an angry cat attacking your project. That's what I always tell my students. An angry cat is trying to scratch up your project. It always makes the kids laugh. All right, so now I've got this. I've given it a bit of a spray, and on the outside, I don't know if I'll even need to put a little extra tacky clay, but on the inside, I'll definitely support it with a bit of extra clay, just as a bit of, just as a way to help secure it. All right, so I have my soft sticky clay, and I'm just gonna put it on the inside around the seam line. And that's just gonna help secure it. Okay, the moment is finally here. It is fully formed. It's the seam line on both the inside and the outside is secure. So now all that we have left is to refine the design on the leaves, and then this piece is done. So I'm really excited with how it turned out overall. I think the flow and movement is my favorite part. I don't know how I'm going to incorporate this technique into future projects of mine. I could see having like some vines climbing up the side of it, but maybe not quite as many rows and as many leaves, more so scattered design instead of many rows of leaves. I think that's probably a little bit busier than my typical style, but I just love how playful and fun this technique is. It's a breath of fresh air, and if you've never tried this technique, you should definitely give it a shot because it's so much fun. Well, it's all done. So overall, I'm in love with this technique. I think it really elevates the standard pinch pot shape and gives a lot of options for what you could do with it. Now, I do think that this is probably, at least this exact style, is not going to probably be in my regular repertoire, but I could definitely see using this technique of pinching off the clay and sculpting it to add some three-dimensional designs to the piece as something that I could definitely use in the future. So I just absolutely love it. I hope you do too. And looking forward to seeing the finished result with all the glaze. If you have any comments about what color you think it should be, please put them down in the captions and I will share the finished results when they come out of the kiln. Until next time, hope you have a great day. Bye.